Welcome back to another reading and correcting of Stepping Up by me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger's Supervisor. Today we are doing chapter 50. Tibs walked along Merchant Row, observing the merchant, the customer, the man and woman dressed in green and black who might or might not be Harry's people. Tibs couldn't tell anymore unless he saw them doing something that Harry didn't allow. Here, they were keeping merchants from assaulting one another or listening to complaints. Another thing he was doing was trying to ignore the fighter who was trailing him. The man wasn't very good at it. As many nights as Tibs spent patrolling the row, he wasn't able to stop all the act of sabotage, and it led to these arguments, as one merchant accused another of being responsible. Tibs noted the man and woman dressed in green and black hassling the leathersmith. He stayed far enough they wouldn't notice him, since the guards and the people working for Sebastian knew him. Every few nights, when he found the time to train, another thief tried to get him discovered. He'd won those encounters and even got a couple of them caught in his stead, but he wasn't sure how far Sebastian would push this. Jackal was certain his father wasn't going to stop until he was crawling to him, asking for forgiveness. He couldn't hear what the might-be guards said, but he could read the promise of violence on their bodies. They were demanding some form of payment for the protection that should come simply by the shop being on the row and the guild protecting the town. Tibs would find them later, and he had no idea. He wanted to make them pay, but he didn't know how to go about it. If there were guards, Harry would take it as Tibs causing him problems, and even if the guard leader would know Tibs wasn't lying, would the two guards have the protection that meant Harry wouldn't be able to tell they were lying? His attempt at explaining that to Harry had gone so well last time, with his lieutenant bold-faced lying to Harry about not having anything magical on her while Tibs could see the essence weave, but he couldn't point it out without having to explain how he saw it, and he wanted to scream in frustration. Instead, he spun and glared at the fighter. The man stopped as if it had been his intent. Tibs didn't recognize him, but he had to be one of the new runners. He was older, mean-looking, and wore a shirt of dirty gray-green rags. The pants were new, so he had been through the dungeon once. His essence was slightly denser than the townsfolk's, but didn't have a tint. There were a lot of secret in this man. Well, Tibs demanded. People instinctively walked away from them, wary of the possibility of a fight, and it let Tibs spot the guard watching them. Was he looking to keep the fight from happening, or make sure it ended badly for Tibs? He hoped it was the former. He wanted there to be some guards he knew for certain were Harry's people. We need to talk. The man's voice was deep, with a growl that made Tibs think it was how bigger brute should talk. Talk? You know what? Then talk. Not here. The man didn't look around. His brown eyes didn't even flick to show if it was the guard he was concerned about or someone else. Tibs didn't have the time. He had too much to do. You want a dark alley or a tavern? But if he didn't deal with him, the fighter would act when Tibs needed it even less. The man looked at him suspiciously. Tibs' reaction wasn't what he'd expected. Tibs could feel a few taverns with a number of people who were surprised when he didn't act intimidated by them. Tavern. At least this wasn't about stabbing him. The man nodded to the tavern between the cookware shop and cobbler. He waited until the man headed in that direction to move and stayed out of reach. The fighter didn't have a weapon, but Jackal was proof that for some of them, fists were weapons enough. The tavern was busy, a combination of people pausing in their shopping, and this being one of the few with good ales. Stowe couldn't make ale in a way that would help the town. He could make water skins, and he could make ale, so he could fill one with the other, but when Tibs tried to explain about the barrels, Stowe asked for him to bring one, and The man pointed to an empty table at the back and headed for the bar. Most people were standing there, drinking in a hurry before heading back out. Tibbs didn't see anyone eyeing him. One runner sat alone on the other side of the room, looking in his tankard as if they might be an escape. Tibbs sat his back against the wall. The man returned with 2 tankards and placed one before Tibbs as he sat. Tibbs eyed it, felt the essence in it. There was corruption in it, but he discovered that corruption was part of a lot of things now that he could sense it. Poison hadn't surprised him, but ale, wine's spirit. But ale, wine's spirit had. Took a long sip, watching the man. If there was poison in there, someone was in for a surprise. The man drank. I'm told you're the one to talk to about surviving the dungeon. We're not allowed to talk about the dungeon outside of it. The man leaned forward. Do I look like I give a fuck what the people running this place want? I wasn't planning on sticking around, but I saw what happened to a few who had the same idea. They pulled us out of bed so we could watch them being thrown into that thing buck-ass naked. Took another drink. Now I'm thinking surviving that thing is my best bet. That means you telling me how. You've been in, Tibbs said, and smiled at them in surprise. The pants. They're from the dungeon. The thief got rogue. If they're a runner, they're called rogues. The man narrowed his eyes. The rogue got them out of the hiding spot in that first room, he said carefully. Did you steal them from your rogue? I took them when one of those spears went through his head. I figured he wasn't going to need them anymore, and they fit me. So it wasn't like he it wasn't. Yeah. And it isn't like a skinny ass was going to be able to, and it isn't like a skinny ass was going to be able to use them anyway. For the harshness of the tone and the way he sounded dismissive about a man dying before him, there was something that made Tibbs think the core of it was true. He had taken them off at that man. Was it because of his light essence? Darkness? I watched him turn to goo, and that sent the 4 of us running out. I'm not going to end up like him, so don't force me to insist. He raised an eyebrow, tankard to his mouth. You think you can force me? Kid, I've broken men 3 times your height, way thicker than you, and who knew how to kill people. You aren't even going to make me sweat. Any of them able to do this? Tibbs pulled all the water out of the man's ale, turning it into essence to pass it through the tankard and back into water, holding it above the table, crystal clear. The man's fear in it, the fear in the man's eyes was quickly covered up. I guess they did that. They didn't tell you everything about me. How about you give me my drink back? Trembling in the man's voice was small. He put the water back, but even before the man made a face after sipping it, Tibbs knew it wouldn't be right. The essences he could sense hadn't mixed the same way, hadn't woven together as they had been. Look, the man sounded more reasonable. There's no way you work with them, this guild. Story is that you saved the dungeon, but I don't believe. He looked in his tankard. Anyway, what I do know is that you're one of the few alive who was dragged here with the first group. You've been thrown into that thing more often than anyone else. You can't tell me you aren't any less eager to get out of here than I am. This is my town. Tibbs considered what he said next. So I'm not leaving. The man snorted. You don't run this place. Best I can work out, no one does right now, although some guy's looking to take control of it. You plan on working for him? Tibbs tried to keep the question casual, but the man's expression turned guarded. What's it to you? This is my town. Tibbs fixed his gaze on the man. The guild built it, and they brought me here, but it's my town. All I had before this was a box to keep the worst of the wind and cold off me, and I had to defend that if I wanted to return to it. I'm not going to let Sebastian take this from me. If you plan on working for him, I'd rather you walk your ass in the dungeon and let him eat you. The man stared at Tibbs. How old are you, kid? Disbelief seeped into his tone. Old enough, I survived my street. Old enough to be someone who survived a dungeon and who you came to for help. You know the kind of man he is? If you get in his way, he's going to crush you. He shrugged. He knows. You tried. I'm still here. Exaggeration were in his favor right now. Not that he planned on letting Sebastian crush him if he tried. Sorry, crush him when he tried. The father studied him as he sipped his tankard, then made a face and motioned to a server. How did you survive those early days in the dungeon? He shook his head. Are you or are you not planning on working for Sebastian? I'm not wasting... Wait. Yeah, interesting. Wasting... Waste. The word looks wrong to me. Oh, that's interesting. And no related words. Okay. I'm not wasting my time with someone who's just going to get in my way later. The tankard arrived, and the man handed a copper for it, having trouble letting go, as if it was dear to him or something he'd held on to for a long time. Had he come here with coins? The guard had taken everything Tibs had when they threw him in the cell, but maybe catacombs and kings did things differently. I'm not. Tibs thought there was something there again, and he believed him. I've done the work for other things, and it didn't end up well. And I've done the work for other things, and it didn't end up going, yeah. You know what? And it ended up badly for me. He smiled as he sipped his ale. Actually, it ended up bad. And it did bad. And it ended badly. He smiled as to himself as he sipped his ale. After that, I decided I'd be the only one in charge of my decisions. Protect your team. Make sure they protect you. And then started. That's not how the world works, kid. This isn't the world, it's the dungeon. If you want to survive it, you need a team, and you need to trust them to keep you safe. Harry said you get told who's on your team, but if it's like it was for me, they're not going to care if you make your own. You're going to need a rogue who's clever enough he can work out what the dungeon tries to hide. You're the fighter, so your job is to be the first one in the fights, keeping the creatures away from those who need distance for their attack. That's your archer for sure, and probably your sorcerer, at least at first. Serena says that more powerful sorcerers can be on the front line. They'll be able to pick off the monsters so you don't get overwhelmed. And your rogue should be able to help too if he's any good. That's 4. The teams always have 5 people. Clerics aren't here yet, at least not to join the teams. I don't know when they'll do that. I figure you'll have the chance to pick one if you're still alive. You expect me to trust a thief to rogue? A rogue, the man said irritably, at my back. All I'm going to get out of it is a sword in it or its edge across my throat. He shrugged. You asked me how to survive your runs. Ask any of the teams who survived this long. You have to trust one another or you die. Paused. His mood threatening to drop. Even if you have that, surviving isn't guaranteed. But if you want a chance, you need to have a team you trust. Even Don's managed to put one together, and he's enough of an asshole. We all expected him to be kicked into the rats by the first team he made. I haven't heard the name before. He's a sorcerer with corruption as his element. Water's mine. He thinks he's better than anyone here, even a noble. And you say he has a team he's able to control even though everyone hates him? And asked thoughtfully. Don't even think about it. Don's got no problem using his element. He's going to have you begging to stop. Kid, the man stood. I don't beg. The man fell onto the free chair next to him, shuddering. Just watched the man curl in pain curled in pain on the floor before looking at Dawn, standing smugly next to Akron, his fighter. Did you really think you could use him to get rid of me? The sorcerer asked. I didn't even need his help to deal with him. Jackal shook his head at Dawn. You know you're going to have to replace that chair, right? I'll deal with that too, Dawn replied. Told you not to think about it, told the man. Then Dawn. I didn't send him. I told him you were good enough to build a team you trusted to protect you. He decided that was the team you wanted. Dawn put his hand on the table. You're lying. You think I didn't notice how no one's paying attention to me anymore? Yet you're still the savior of the dungeon? I know you're behind that too. I have more to do with that ever so pleasant attitude of yours, Dawn, Jackal said, grinning at the sorcerer. You know Tibs doesn't care enough about you or how good you think your team is. He's got me, so he already has the best the town has to offer. The sorcerer sneered. You think you can compare to me? I seem to recall you on your knees before me, crying. Pain will do that to me, Jackal replied. Meet me on the training field if you ever want another go at it. You aren't worth my time, he grunted. Neither of you are. Dawn spun in screaming fright as he faced an angry Krosa. The chair, Dawn, the server said through clenched teeth. I was heading to pay for it, the sorcerer hurried to say, then was pushing through the crowd, the server on his heel. Jackal looked at Akron. You know he's going to get you to pay for him back. The fighter shrugged. I can deal with his temper if it means surviving the dungeon. You two watch yourself. The town's turning nasty recently. He headed for the exit. Tibs crouched next to the man on the floor. The corruption was hooked deep within his body, looking solid in the otherwise ephemeral essence. He had warned him, so Tibs didn't have to do anything. The cleric should be able to deal with this before the long, and since Dawn was the only person with corruption in the town, he wouldn't be able to deny doing this. Only this wasn't Dawn being an asshole. There's no doubt this man would have gone as far as killing Dawn to get the team, and considering how strong Dawn was, this was only a small use of his essence. Tibs could get a candy to dissolve into foul-smelling goo just by pushing corruption essence into it. What could Dawn do to a person with his? Harry already didn't like the recruits, so how was he going to act to someone attempting to kill a runner? Would it be just a cell, or did he have worse punishment planned for them? Took the man by the shoulder and pulled him into a chair, absorbing most of the essence in the process and disrupting what was left. The pain would quickly go away, but if it was the same as what Tibs had done to his friends, the man would be sick for a while. It'll pass. It'll pass, Tibs said. Dawn's quick to put people who don't matter to him out of his mind. I am so glad he was nowhere near this strong when I pissed him off, Jekyll said. What's your name? What do you care? The man snarled. Jekyll took Tibs' tankard and placed it before the man. I'm Jekyll. You already know Tibs. Seeing how we're all on Don's bad side, we might as well get to know each other. The man glared at the sorcerer's back. Does he have a good side? Don and Crossa's father were arguing, and it didn't look to be going in Don's favor. Jekyll chuckled. Not that I've ever seen, but he's held on to his team, so there has to be something there, right? The man took the tankard. I'm Quigley Marshall. He drained it. Just waited until Crossa looked in their direction to motion for more ale. As the server stepped behind the bar, Don handed a silver piece to his father. Tell me, Quigley Marshall, Jekyll said, studying the man. What did you do to get sent to the catacomb they took you out of? The man smiled and fought to keep it as he straightened through the pain. I killed an entire regiment of King Barnacle the Just by myself. And this concludes chapter 50 of Stepping Up. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like, If you want to know when the next one is going to be, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read further ahead, you can do that on Royal Road for free. If you want to support me, that's on Patreon, where you can read further ahead of the story, as well as pretty much everything else I've written. And if you want if you want to watch me do these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. The links are in the notes. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.